Hello, I am Njol, and I have been thinking, I thought you should know. This is the Earth. Earth is round. Should know. Which is well and all. I came to realize there's something. There is a saying that artists and writers have no sense of scale. And that is true. This Earth looks small, but no, it is not small. It's frigging humongous because you can keep going in and in and in and in. It's a beautiful world. It's a world with a lot of variety. There's one thing that occurred to me. Look at the demographic of Earth time period. For example, the Middle Ages, or the time when the Viking Age. And that is, imagine a thought experiment here, the writing thing. This, for example, this here is South Africa in Congo, for example. Right, so that's well and all, but dang it. So, oh yeah, for example, if someone down here or from Egypt would or get over just on getting over to Egypt or to Norway, for example, in the time of the Vikings, right? Strange. There's a couple of oddities to mention. First of all, is the fact that, well, back in the day, boats were kind of crap. Not crap, but they were kind of mediocre when it came to travel. And most of the world were, wilderness, and like here, where you with a road, maybe not here, but there's a road, lots of nature and wildlife, diseases and more diseases. So going along the coast, not a very likely speed, because you will probably also get killed or bad weather or tribes or any potential kingdom along the coast of Africa, right? So that's not very likely. Another option would be to go through, the Middle East, through Egypt and Sudan and over here in Ethiopia. That could work. And there was a lot of trade between from here to here and onwards. And most of the trade had to do with slaves. And slaves were not likely to survive for very long or were treated well at all. So the likelihood of a Enoch slave, ah, someone who's lost their, someone who, a slave that has gotten their penis cut off so they cannot reproduce. For them to survive is very unlikely. So, but if you somehow manage to travel, let's say, from here and end up over here, that trip itself would probably take many months, if not a year or more. Because essentially, the distance is huge and the land here is absolutely terrible. And the only safe spot is really to travel along the river. You can also see here that the river is the only place that has any meaningful names. Everything in here in between is in hospital desert. some small settlements here and there, and eking out an existence. And I keep in mind though, most of it back in Middle Ages, most of this did not exist. Or so there was no road you could travel. There's no airplane you could travel, or a quick trip with a boat. Because remember, a boat uses sails. And the sail ships are reliant on sea, the climate, time of the year, how much resources you can bring along, the skill of the crew. And then you also need to think about the knowing where to go. That's just one other thing is very easy to forget, and that is the fact that the world was not completely was not exactly explored, and traveling took a god awful long time. So sure you can go down here, for example, somehow end up in Tunis, go through this Gibraltar, but that requires you to actually have the map and navigational knowledge to even make it down there. And from what I understand, in Norway, for example, in the Viking Age, it was very, well, it's very sparsely populated, incredibly long, and incredibly hard to get anywhere. But it's no, so the most of the travels between Sweden and Norway, bits of Denmark, and you have from Iceland that has a lot of travel to Norway, and then you have the Faroe, and then you have this here in Scotland, England. That's the most used, apparently, colonized and invaded or whatever across the North Sea. And even that depended on good weather, but the distance is short enough that you could make it alive. So sure you have Greenland, but I don't know much about Greenland. But it doesn't look very green to me. And sure there have been tales about Viking how getting from Norway to America. But that could be possible if they went from here to there to there and then over here. That should be possible in if they're good enough for rowing and the wind is not completely bonkers. And they have a good way to know which direction they're going. Because, you know how to read star charts. That's a different skill as well. Which is its own weirdness. So where am I going with this? I'm just, oh yeah, I was thinking about if you were to. So here is Norway, right? So that's well and all. Then say travel distance from here. So if you somehow can't go through land, as that would be inefficient and hard. So yeah, let's say if you would make a story, right, about let's say a traveler from, for example, let's say you have like a 13 warrior where an Arab end up in Norway and doing some weird stuff. Sure, that's one thing, but let's say, for example, if someone from Somalia, Congo, or Tanzania, or Rwanda, or Well, or Kenya, managed to somehow survive the arduous, the terrible journey across the desert and over to Egypt. And we needed to make a story about interesting stories in the ways. Find a way to fight all of the diseases, the bad treatment, the change in climate, the lack of resources. Right, and then we need to find an excuse for how to get a sad person on board a boat that somehow has traveled across the whole coast through Gibraltar and over to Malta or something. Or, they managed to make their way over to Italy and as a slave in Rome. And then let's say somebody bought the slave in Rome. But then you have to, but that's done. And that's an adventure all of its own. And in the ways, you might actually be, assailed by pirates. And then you might be caught. You know, so yeah, that's one thing. But the thing is, this trip would take many years. And, it would be more enticing just to settle down somewhere and call the quits. So far, we haven't really established why you would want to make this journey. There is not like there is much to see here in Norway. It's not that Norway was well known at the time. Reason and the communication, well, what communication? We can birds, different languages. There was no telephone, no telegraph, no mail service. Right, and so that's a different story altogether. And then, so let's say if somehow was enthralled by an ancient artifact, it wouldn't be really ancient at this time. Somehow be a stone object that had washed ashore, I suppose. So yeah, you can't really treat the world such as you treat a civilization game, nor can you treat a world size of Earth as Age of Empires, even though that would be the best analogy for this sort of world building and scenario, because it's so compressed based on smaller battles. No, so yeah, so if you manage to somehow get to Rome, and depending on which era we'll be dealing with the Roman, early, late, or middle Roman Empire. That's well and all, but then you also need to get across, let's say, all of Europe, which these days have a road network. Before that, you had to travel across mountains, valleys, and wilderness, and barbarian tribes, and fighting a different climate, more bugs, more diseases, foreign food. Hell, even the drinking water on a different side of the earth can be problematic, also just due to different bacterial content and let alone the microbiology. Also, that getting acclimated to different foods. You can't, and oh yeah, you didn't have vaccines, antibodies, antivirus. Anti-venom vaccines, biotics. So if at any stage of this journey you would get a serious injury, it's a very high risk that you not survive. And if you then somehow manage to make it over to England along the coast here, and then, for example, you make it over to Stavanger here, Norway, you would come across the thing that what are you supposed to do there? You cannot speak the language. So if you're here, right, you cannot speak the language, cannot communicate with locals. Locals will see you as some sort of weird alien creature, and there will be more stories told about you arriving in the land, and that would travel along for centuries, if until priests came along, evangelized Norway. The Vikings were kind of bad at writing down stuff. So even if somebody who somehow made it over here, there isn't any stories written about them. Because how could they? The monks and priests were the one who was taking off the word. Those were the one writing stories. Those who travel all the way through all of the European countries, all somehow, and made it over to Norway and Denmark, where Bluetooth eventually unified the Viking clans here in Scandinavia. So yeah, and the same holds true if you're going to travel other way. So as you can see then, you have to live on the coast. You need to have boating skills, star maps, in sense of direction, a good organization, good luck with the weather. There's a reason why most of European history, God, has to do with France, Germany, the Dutch kingdoms, England, later become Great Britain and Denmark and all of Sweden. Because traveling between these places on the earth, not exactly, was well mapped and essentially it was well documented. Because there was so much travel, and it's always been, and that never stopped. Also, the thing is, if you came from down here and you travel all the way north to here, somehow survive, it would be really, really miserable. Because you would deal with rain, the cold, the wind, and the weather. And if you travel from here down here, well, a lot of desert, a lot of sand, sun, getting boiled alive, and if you have hit the wetlands somewhere, you might just get malaria and then shit your ass out. So, also, for a trip from, let's say, go to, Oslo into the Pacific takes roughly around 24 hours, and go to even to get to Hangzhou in China, still have the issue of as more or less a straight line. That's only because you can skip the terrain. So yeah, I don't know how this is helping. I don't know how this is going to work or how the logistics be. But it's food for thought because there's a lot of misconception going on about distance, survivability, and taking the transition, from one part of the world to the other part of the world. Believable. After all, the Middle Ages and the Viking Age is not the same as around the Earth 80 days. Signing out, like, and subscribe by the Patreon and all of that jazz. Links down below. Goodbye.